In today's vlog, I'm going to say some things that may be hard for some of you to hear, but I can promise you this. If you understand the topic of today's vlog and you can really grasp it, I can guarantee you it's the key to your success or failure. You might want to grab a pen or some paper or open a Word document or something. Take notes today, folks. Today is important and it could change your career for the rest of your life. A healthy dose of advice, opinion, and most importantly, truth is coming up next.
Gather up, you weary souls. Show them you ain't dead. Tell them that you ain't coming home. Woo, rise. Woo, rise. Woo, rise.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. It is so good to see you here. It is Tuesday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. It was Memorial Day weekend. So before we get started, I just want to say a quick shout out and thank you to all the brave men and women in uniform who have paid the ultimate sacrifice so that we can do things like have YouTube channels and get up every day and, for the most part, not fear for our lives, but live in freedom. So to all the men and women who wear the uniform and who have paid the ultimate price and sacrificed for our freedom, we thank you. If you haven't already, just hit the subscription button, but make sure that you hit the bell icon next to it so that you're notified every time I upload a new video. If you want to follow me across social media, it is super simple to do. It's at the Steve Freeman across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, everywhere else you can think of in social media world. It's at the Steve Freeman. Today we're going to talk about how to develop your story. And this is a topic that I'm sure almost 99.9% of you have really never stopped to think about. Here's the one thing I can tell you. If you're one of these people who constantly feel like you're coming up short of success or coming up short of realizing achievement in your ultimate goals, or like we've talked about in previous vlogs, if you feel like you're on that inevitable treadmill where you get up and, remember this phrase, you're doing a lot, but you're not getting a lot done and you don't feel like you're moving forward, I think I have the answer for you today. If this is you, and that whole scenario just described you, I have a feeling that you haven't discovered the importance of telling your own story, knowing what your story is, and most importantly, knowing how to effectively communicate that story with others. The first part of today's topic we're going to talk about is, what is your story? Think of it like this. If your story was a movie, would people walk out of the theater and want their money back or wish they could get those 2 hours of their life back? Or would it leave people wanting more? Would it leave people walking out of the theater going, God, I hope they do a sequel to this movie because it's so interesting? Here's why I say that. You need to understand this, especially for those of you new artists, songwriters in the music business. But honestly, no matter what you're passionate about, no matter what your business is, no matter what your profession is, you need to understand this one fundamental thing. People do not buy products. They buy people. And by that, I mean they buy your story. They buy into you. Artists, I see all the time on Facebook. We're recording a new single. We're putting out a new video. We're doing this. We're doing that. You need to understand, 99.9% of people that you're putting that out there in front of, they don't care. That's why when you put it out, and like I said earlier, I'm going to say some things today that sound harsh, but I'm not doing it to be mean. I'm not doing it to be rude, and I'm certainly not doing it to be critical. I'm doing it because you need to hear these things so that you can reevaluate your situation and what you're doing and course correct so that you can head towards success. Guys, people care about you. If they don't buy into you, they're not going to buy your product, meaning they don't care about your single. Listen, I know you get frustrated. I see it on social media all the time. Artists releasing music and in the studio or doing a video or being all over social media talking about what you're doing. People don't care. Think about it honestly. So you're going to release a new single. To who? The 35 people that bought your last one? And again, I'm not trying to be hurtful and I'm not trying to be critical, But you need to sit back and look and think that, what's the old saying? The definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. So instead of releasing that new single and thinking that somehow your last one sold 30 to 50 units and the new one's going to sell 5,000, 10,000, 100,000, why? Because the song's that much better? No, see, they don't care. That's what you need to understand. They don't care about your new single. They care about you. And the more interesting you are, the more likely they are to buy your product. They care first and foremost about your story. Is your story interesting enough? Guys, if you need to, this is so important. If you need to pause this video, reach up there and hit the pause button, because this is something I want you to think about. Honestly, sit and think about. Is your story relatable? Is your story interesting? Does it draw people in? Does it make people want to root for you? Does it make people want to champion you? Does it make people want to tell other people about you? I will say this, going back to the treadmill, if you constantly feel like you're on a treadmill and you're not really going anywhere, you're doing a lot but not getting a lot done, I submit to you that if this is where you find yourself, you have not found a way to effectively communicate your story with your fan base. Most importantly, the hard thing about this entire concept is that you may come to the realization and understanding that your story just isn't that interesting. Want proof of what I'm saying is true? Take a look around you. Take a look at the very successful people, or people that you would identify as successful. And I guarantee you that if you were honest with yourself for just a second, you would admit that it's not about the products. It's not about the hype. It's not about any of that. It's about the fact that you bought into the story, that story was interesting to you, and you wanted to be a supporter of that story. Sure, you love the product, whether it's music or computers. Think about Apple for a second. Yes, Apple makes great products, but everybody loves the story. There's been several movies made about it because it's such a great story. That Steve Jobs started this business, one of the largest businesses in the world, in a garage. And they fought and they scraped and they tried and they failed and they succeeded. And then at the height of it, Steve Jobs is fired from his own company, the company that he started. And he goes off and he does several other things. And then he comes back and he brings the iPhone. It's the story. It's not about that physical phone that you hold in your hand. It's not about that iMac or the PowerBook. It's not about any of that. It's about the story. And you bought into the story, so you bought the products. Want another example? Let's talk about the music business for a second. Let's take a look at Garth Brooks. Now, you could argue that Garth Brooks is, well, by all account and numbers, he is one of the top 2, 3 most successful selling solo artist of all time, right up there with Michael Jackson. I mean, the guy has sold hundreds of millions of records, and by all accounts, by the definition that any of us would put out there, is extremely successful. But Garth Brooks, starting out in Oklahoma, playing just like you're playing now. If you're a new artist, he did the exact same thing you're doing. He tried to get noticed. Do you know he came to Nashville and every single record label told Garth Brooks no at least 2 times? Think about that for a second. How many times have you heard no? Whether it's a publishing deal or a record label or playing this venue or this management company or this booking agency, how many times have you heard no? Well, that happened to Garth Brooks too. And side note, it's happened to every major artist as well. They were all turned down by 1 or more record labels multiple times. There was going to be a round at the Bluebird Cafe here in Nashville, and at the last minute, one of the people performing in the round had to back out. And somebody remembered Garth and said, hey, if you're still in town, you want to come do this round? And he said, of course. He took advantage of the opportunity. And his story changed forever by making the decision to go do that round that night. And by all accounts, you can say that that's where the success story with Garth Brooks started, because at that round, he was discovered. Yes, even though he had made his rounds all over Nashville, the door had been slammed in his face time after time after time after time. He kept going. And once he started, he never stopped. and we all buy into that story. Yes, the music's great, and Garth's a phenomenal entertainer, but what would he have been without the story? Here's another example for you. Let's think about social media for a second. I know we all place so much importance on social media. Think about this for a second. Take Instagram, for example. Everybody loves posting and getting the likes and getting the comments and getting the followers and all of that. But I wanted to go back and do some research on some physical analytics and look at some numbers that Instagram has put out. I want you to think about this. Did you know that your Instagram stories have 10 times more engagement than the posts? Why do you think that is? And to me, it's no coincidence that they call them Instagram stories. And once you think about it for a second, you realize that, yeah, it's cool when you take a snapshot and you throw it up on Instagram and people can see that moment in time frozen for exactly what it is. It is you're eating this, or you're having a Starbucks, or you've got this new outfit, or you've got a new guitar, or whatever it is, the message is you're trying to communicate through that one picture. It's incapable of telling the entire story. But when Instagram stories came out and people can actually feel like they are following along with your life, that it's something more than a picture. They are in the moment with you, living in that moment with you as you tell your story. That's why the engagement of Instagram stories is 10 times more than that of just a normal picture that you'll find in your feed. People are hungry to be a part of your story. Are you telling it properly? Are you communicating it? Do you even know what your story is? The last example I want to give is publicists. Now, I work with a lot of independent artists, and through my artist development company, we take on like 3 artists at a time, and we'll work with them from beginning to end, and from just starting out to achieving the ultimate goal, whether that's getting signed by a record label or being a successful independent artist. But never, not once, have I started working with an artist that one of the first thing that comes out of their mouth is about a publicist, and we want a publicist. Why do you want a publicist? Because you think that having a publicist is going to get you in all the major industry papers and blogs, and hopefully get you on TV or the Golden Crown of the Tonight Show appearance. All those things that you think and you look out and you see all these other artists are doing, you attribute that to them having a great publicist, so you want a publicist. But I want you to take a second and slow down. I have worked with the top publicists in Nashville and Los Angeles, and any single one of them that is worth a grain of salt will tell you this: publicists don't create the story. They tell and spread the story. So if you want to have all of those interviews and you want to be on all these websites and blogs and on television and all this, you have to have a story worth telling. You can't go hire a publicist, and they're expensive. I mean, they range anywhere from $1,500 a month to, I worked with one that was $5,000 a month retainer. They will tell you you have to have a story worth telling. They don't create the story. They just tell and spread the story. So again, pointing back to just how important your story is. Okay, guys, it is time for the second part in today's video, and it is how to identify your story. Going back to the movie analogy for a second, every great movie started with a screenplay. Well, every movie started with the screenplay. But I can guarantee you that the great movies and the movies you think about and you look back on and you remember, and we call them our favorite movies, they were based on what? A great story, great characters, people that you invested in, that helped tell the overall story that you bought into, that from beginning to end made a wonderful and great story that you enjoyed being told. That's why it's your favorite movie. That's why we go to the movies at all, to be entertained. We don't go to see the stars. We don't go to see Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise or The Rock. We don't go just specifically for them. Although, if you think about it for a second, sometimes we do, but we don't go because we're going to see them specifically. We go to see them because they have a history of telling great stories. There is something in the screenwriting world called the story arc. Now, this is where if you need a pen and paper, I can't tell you how important that if you implement what we're about to go over, how it could change your life and change your career. And I also want to say this. If you think, nah, I don't need to do that, or I'm too busy, or I got that, you've got the wrong attitude and you'll never succeed. If you can't take what I'm telling you right now seriously and you don't feel like you've got the time, I can tell you right now you don't have a story interesting enough for people to buy into. And you don't have the dedication to make it come to fruition. Screenwriters use a tool, what's called a story arc. We're going to go through this story arc. I'm going to flash this graphic up on the screen so you can see it and not just hear me talk about it. So here we go. The story arc is comprised of 3 acts. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end. In Act 1, first you have your starting position, or the beginning. Now, this could be finding out you have an interest in something or a passion for something that you want to pursue professionally. You also begin to establish a routine to begin to move forward and set yourself up for a more serious approach. Then you have Act 2, or the middle. This is where you have an inciting moment or trigger. Now, this could be attending a concert and realizing that you love it and this is what you want to do. I want to be like that person up there on stage. This is what I want to do with my life. It can also be reading a great book and realizing you have a passion for words and knowing that you want to be an author. You know, it could even be as simple as eating an unbelievable pizza and knowing in your heart that you want to own a restaurant someday. Or it could be meeting someone in a particular field that inspired you and made you want to do what they do. It can literally be anything that you experienced that set you on your professional course. It's the passion trigger moment. Also in Act 2, you have the rising action or conflict. This is the point where you start to put your desires into action beyond just having the passion for it. You decide to go to school and study that particular field, or change jobs to focus more on your passion, or make a commitment to follow this path with every fiber of your being. It's that inside fire, that drive that pushes you in one direction or another. Also in Act 2, you'll find your crisis moment. And this is so important. This, to me, and how I've applied it to my life, is where you start to struggle and face multiple roadblocks to achieving your goals. Now, that can be outside influences such as parents or teachers or family or friends not being supportive or as supportive as you would like. This can be a lack of financial support, a personal or professional setback like not achieving success or your goals as quickly as you thought you would. Fact of the matter is, we all face crisis. It's how you deal with it that matters. The next step along the story arc, you find Act 2 ending and Act 3 beginning with the climax. Notice that since the beginning of Act 1, we have steadily been moving forward and up, despite the fact that we've faced conflict and crisis, because we will always face both of those. No matter how successful we are, no matter how great your story is, we are all going to face conflict and crisis. And then we get to the climax, the big moment. And this is where Act 2 ends and Act 3 begins. And I think that's important. This point of climax can be actually achieving a goal or success on a large scale, or even a small one for that matter. It can also be just a realization of the journey, or even just your effort coming to some sort of fruition. And since we can't be on top all the time, you'll notice that Act 3 begins a descent, or kind of going downhill, or falling action as screenwriters actually call it. This doesn't mean that you are moving backwards. It simply means that you are working your way towards your resolution and fulfillment. This to me signifies that you've come full circle and that your story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. That your story makes sense. Now that we've talked about what a story arc is, the third part of today's video is how to apply the story arc to your life in your career. I have an exercise for you, and I hope you'll take a few minutes to do it. You don't have to do it as the video's going, but I would encourage you to sit down with a physical piece of paper and a physical pen, or if you're an iPad or laptop junkie, or you're on your desktop computer, open up a Word document and put this into action. Apply the story arc to your life and your career just like this. The reason this is so helpful is not only is it important for you to have an interesting and relatable story to put out to the world, you also need to know how to effectively communicate that story. If you don't know your own story, how are you supposed to tell other people? And most importantly, how are they supposed to be interested in your story if you can't even tell it right? I'm going to flash some of this up on the screen so that you will have time to actually write these titles down. Yes, I'm actually expecting you to do this. Those of you that give a damn about your career, I think you'll do this. I'm going to flash these titles up on the screen and leave them there so that you'll have time to write them down. I'll also put all of these down in the description below in case you need to come back to the video. You can look them up and go from there. All I want you to do is follow the story arc. In Act 1, what was your beginning? Where did you start? Next, what was that inciting moment, or what was that trigger? What was that event that happened in your life that told you and started that fire deep down inside that made you say, I want to do this for a living, or I want to do this with my life? What was that moment? Write it down. What were your rising moments? What were some of the small victories that happened once you had that trigger and once you knew and you aggressively started pursuing it? What were some of the things that happened along the way that help add value to your story? And ultimately, what was your crisis point? Was there a major setback? Did you have family members that weren't supportive? Did you have other people that weren't supportive? Could you not financially get the funding to do what it is that you want to do? Did you want to go to school and didn't get the student loans or didn't get that scholarship? What was your moment of crisis? Think about it very hard and come up with a very detailed answer for that. What was your crisis moment? Then think about where you are right now and where you've come. What would you call your climax? What so far in your journey has been the peak? What's been the high point so far? Go ahead and write that down. Now try to identify your falling action. Think about the culmination of your story's story arc, from the beginning, the middle, and the end. Do you have some sort of resolution? Has where you started led to where you are right now? And all the little different points in between, from the trigger moment, to the rising action, to crisis, to climax, to resolution. Have you come full circle? Can you draw that circle out and identify each one of those points that have led you to where you are right now? Once you have physically identified your story arc and you've put specific situations and scenarios in this story arc, I encourage you to go somewhere quiet and zone out and get away from all the distractions and think about your story. And I know it sounds kind of kooky and crazy and stupid to do this, but I'm telling you, sometimes the best ideas and the best realizations come when we step away from all of the excitement around us, we step away from the passion, we step away from the distractions, and we look at ourselves honestly. Because like I said earlier, if you can master the story arc and telling your story, your success will go through the roof. Because people, again, they don't buy products, they buy you. And if your story is interesting, I can guarantee you, you're going to find success. So get in a quiet place, take some time to yourself, and think hard and long about your story. Does it make sense? Is it interesting? Is it relatable? I guarantee you that if you take a look at it honestly and hard enough, most of us will find that our story is not as interesting as we think it is, because we tend to buy into the perception of ourselves. And we see 250 people like this post on Instagram, and I've got 50,000 likes on Facebook, and we start to buy into that, but we realize that none of that really means anything. None of that really translates to success in physical or financial form. It's all just kind of perception. So when we look at ourselves and we take a really hard look and we look at our story, most of us find that our story is just not that interesting, or we're missing some of the elements from the story arc. Now, don't get discouraged, okay? We all find ourselves here. But here's the positive thing, and here's the amazing thing. You have today. Hopefully you have tomorrow, and you have the years to come to correct your story arc. Make sure that you take part in things that add to the value of your story. When you look at it honestly, you can ask yourself, what would make my story more interesting? Are there things that I forgot about or I didn't think were major things that may be major things that help me communicate my story more effectively? Maybe people will find this more interesting about myself than what I'm putting out to the rest of the world. Most importantly, you need to start asking yourself every single day, every time you get ready to go do something, it doesn't matter. Ask yourself this before you do everything. Does what I'm about to do actually benefit my story? Does it make it more interesting? Does it make it more relatable? When you begin making decisions for your professional life and your personal life based on the story arc, and you start asking yourselves about various different scenarios, and if that does add value to my story, does it make my story more relatable? I promise you, you will be heading in a much more fruitful and successful direction. Because again, if you don't find your story interesting, nobody else is going to find your story interesting either. Again, people buy into people. People love stories. People love underdog stories. So for you independent artists out there, you actually have a lot more going for you than you think you do. But you've got to learn how to effectively communicate your story. Again, going back to social media, and I think this is a perfect example. The numbers prove this out, and if you actually ever do any research, you can find these numbers for yourself and look at it, because it's actually quite astonishing. One of the mistakes that artists make way too often is that 90% of your posts on social media are about streaming your new song, or in the studio recording my new song, or we're shooting a music video, go to YouTube and watch my music video. But here's the problem with that. The numbers show that people don't care about that. They care about the picture of the pizza that you're eating. They care about the real life scenarios. That's why the Instagram stories numbers are 10 times higher as far as engagement than just your regular posts. People want to be brought in to your real life. So bring them in. Tell them your story. For goodness sakes, tell them your story and make it interesting. Here's kind of the last thing that I want to talk about. And I spent a lot of time actually thinking about different areas of my life and how I can apply it to my profession and as a songwriter and a music producer and YouTuber, I guess now for all intents and purposes. But we're talking about your story as a whole. But I also got to thinking about it that there is absolutely no reason why you can't apply this theory to everything you get ready to do. If you're an artist and you're getting ready to go record a new EP or album, or you're getting ready to release a single or a video, or whatever it is that you're going to do, you can apply the story arc to each little individual effort in your life. If you're going to be releasing that new EP, create a story arc. Where's the beginning? Where's the middle? Where's the end? Bring people along on this journey. Don't just expect them to click on a link once it's done and buy it and think that that's the story. I recorded an EP, I put it on iTunes, I put it on Spotify, buy it or stream it now. That's a boring ass story. It's just flat boring. Think of story arc. Think of everything that you do as a story arc. If you're a songwriter, you better be using the story arc. There needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's got to come full circle, and it's got to go from beginning to resolution. Why can't you apply that to every area of your life? Whether it's a promotional opportunity, whether it's out on the road touring, whatever it is that you're going to do or that you want to do, physically block it out on a story arc. And I promise that if you start doing this and you actually start using this, you will see that your story becomes much more interesting. You'll find that people become way more involved with you and your efforts and what it is that you're doing than they ever have before. Because everybody wants to be part of an interesting story. Everybody wants to tell other people when they find something interesting or when it means something to them. And you have to make your story personal to other people. If you really want to get down to it, the difference between success and failure in anything is your ability or inability to get other people as interested in what it is that you're doing or what you have to offer as you are. So, final thoughts for the day. If you want to be successful, stop trying to sell the product. Stop trying to make your story all about the surface elements, the single, the streaming, the video, the buy this, buy that, I've got merch, I've got new hats, I've got t-shirts. That's all surface, because nobody will buy any of those things if they don't buy you first. If you can become proficient at telling your story and identifying what your story is and bringing people in to your story, I promise you, you'll sell all the surface stuff you want to sell. Because people, when they buy into a story and they buy into you, they tend to show overwhelming support. And that could be by streaming your new single, or buying your new single, or watching your new video, or sharing your new video, or talking to other people about you. What you want them doing is sharing your story. But you got to make sure that that story is interesting and worth telling first. Lastly, the most important thing about your story is that it be truthful. The most important thing about anybody's story is that it is unique to them. It's unique to you. Show people the real you. Show them the entire story arc. Show them the beginning. Show them that trigger moment that made you so passionate. Show them that passion. Show them the crisis moment. Show them the struggles. Because I guarantee you more people identify with struggle and crisis than success every day, all day long. So make it truthful. Show them the real you. Show them your story. I promise they value the journey more than the destination. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in for another music business vlog. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you're going to take it to heart and learn how to tell your story. If you did get something out of today's video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't get anything out of it and you hated it, hit the thumbs down button. Just please make sure you hit it twice or it doesn't go through. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. All you have to do is hit the subscription button, but make sure that you hit the little bell icon next to it so that you're notified every time I upload new content. Want to follow me across social media? It's at the Steve Freeman. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and everywhere else online. Guys, thanks so much. And don't forget, tell your story effectively. Until next time, keep being creative, keep pressing the boundaries, and there's nothing wrong with being independent. See you next time.